Hi there, how's it going? I'm Richard Kistnen, and I'm an attorney here in the New York City area, helping people like you with things like buying and selling real estate and bankruptcy. In this video, I'm going to walk through what are closing costs if you're selling real estate in the New York City area. Oftentimes when I'm representing a seller, they go through a lot with if they're represented by a real estate agent, real estate broker, but they want to know exactly what they're walking away with, which makes sense because they need to plan out what they need to do for tax purposes, for purchasing a new property or moving. So all of that makes sense. What you want to have before you accept an offer, before you enter into contract, you want to know what you'll be walking away with. So in this video, I'm going to try to walk you through exactly the things that are most common and what you can anticipate if you're selling property in the New York City area. So once you have an offer, once you have a contract, right, you're going to have your purchase price. So that's going to be our starting point. Then from there, once we're getting to closing, we're going to have adjustments, right? You may hear people talk about this, your attorney speak about it, but adjustments are going to be things like real estate taxes, the water and sewer bill, rents, deposits. If we're talking about a co-op, condo, maintenance, common charges, all that has to be adjusted, and generally is going to be adjusted through the date of closing. So as a seller, you're responsible for those items up until the date of closing, and then the buyer takes responsibility as of the date of closing. So that's what's going to be adjustments. Once buyer and seller attorney confirm the adjustments, then we have the amount that you should be expecting at closing. Once we have the amount due to you, the seller, at closing, then we're going to start walking through what specifically the closing costs for there are that reduce your proceeds, your net proceeds. So the first thing that we're going to talk about are mortgages, liens, things like that, right? So if you have a mortgage on your property, that has to be paid off at closing. Generally speaking, when you're selling, you'll probably be asked to get a payoff letter. If the closing is on the 15th of the month, maybe a few days at the payoff, good through a few days afterwards, because oftentimes, and especially today, with a lot of fraud being prevalent with respect to wire instructions, more and more title companies want to have payoff checks sent off as certified checks. So you'll need that payoff letter good through a few days after closing. But if there are other liens, maybe a second mortgage, a HELOC line that might be open, maybe a tax lien or a judgment, all those liens that affect the property have to be paid through the date of closing. So that's going to be the first closing cost, right? Whatever you owe on the property has to be paid off. The second big ticket item in terms of closing costs are going to be real estate broker commissions. So if you've been working with a real estate broker, you probably signed a listing agreement, whatever percentage you agree to pay the broker, that check is going to be cut from your proceeds at the closing. So the second closing costs are real estate broker commissions. The third big ticket item in terms of seller closing costs in the New York City area are going to be transfer taxes. Transfer taxes are paid by the seller. There are a few exceptions, which we'll talk about one particular here since property value has gone up. But generally speaking, if you're selling property in New York City, there's going to be both New York City and New York State transfer taxes. New York State charges, it's like $4 per thousand. It's like 0.4%. On the purchase price. New York City charges, if the contract is less than $500,000, 1% of the purchase price. If it's $500,000 and above, 1.425. Now, a part of transfer taxes that you'll often hear that the buyer actually pays in many transactions is going to be the mansion tax. So once the value goes over $1 million, there's another 1% that's added to transfer taxes. So in many, if not most transactions, the buyer is paying that mansion tax. But before we get to the $1 million mark, the seller's paying the transfer taxes. Again, if it's less than $500,000, the total between state and city ends up being 1.4%. If it's more than $500,000 or more, it ends up being 1.825%. So those are transfer taxes. The next things in terms of closing costs are going to be the seller attorney fee. Listen, we prepare the contract, go back and forth with the terms of the deal with respect to the buyer attorney, title company and whatnot. So this is our fee. This is what we earn at the closing. So hopefully it gets paid. And the other thing is going to be a title closer fee. At every closing, there's going to be someone from the buyer's title company who appears. They either work with the title company or they're contracted by the title company to like navigate and control all the documents. So they're the ones who contact your mortgage company to confirm the amount. They're the ones who take possession of all the checks for the mortgage, the transfer taxes, the bank's quarter point, and they're the ones who take it back and they make sure that they get dispersed. So both sides pay the title closer at the closing. Many title closers, if there are multiple mortgages, so if you've got 2 mortgages on the property, they'll charge a certain what's called pickup fee for each mortgage. So you'll want to have your attorney confirm that amount, or if there are, what that pickup fee is before you get to closing, so you can know what that looks like. And then finally, if you are selling a condo or co-op, there may be additional fees. Oftentimes, once you've confirmed the closing, the building or the transfer agent will send out a letter to all the parties itemizing all the fees, what the buyer's paying, what the seller's paying. So those fees may include things like move out, the building legal fee, processing fee, and so on. So those are the closing costs if you're selling property in the New York City area. This also includes NASA and stuff as well. So the big ticket items are going to be, again, mortgages and liens, real estate broker, your transfer taxes, your seller attorney fee, your title closer fee, and then finally, if we're dealing with a condo or co-op, we're going to be dealing with whatever fees that they may have to process the transaction. And that's it. Those are your closing costs. So if you're thinking about selling your property, you can simply take out a small sheet of paper and work through the numbers, right? What do you owe on the mortgage? What's your agreement with respect to the mortgage, the real estate broker for commission? In terms of transfer taxes, you can simply do the math based on the purchase price, whatever your attorney fee is, title closer fee. Generally allocate like a couple $100 for that. And then finally, condo co-op fees, whatever the building may charge for that. You can oftentimes get a list in advance of what those fees look like, so you can calculate that out. If you're a seller in New York City or in the New York City area and you found this helpful, I'd appreciate like a like button, subscribe button. Let me know if you had any questions that I can further explore or like draw out in the comments below. And until next time, take care, be well, bye for now.